Russian Orthodox are under attack. That's what Tucker Carlson says. He's on the warpath. In his new thing after the lighthearted interview with Andrew Tate, he's going on grilling people about why do inner city school children don't have enough iPads when we're giving all these tanks to Ukraine. And he's going on, I mean, and it's under, he's like saying this with like this pro-life banner in the background. It's this pro-life, and he's just going on about how Russia should just be killing everybody. And his big thing is that Christians are being persecuted in Ukraine, and that it's the Russian Orthodox Church, the clergy are being persecuted for their faith. And anybody who is a really religious person should just see right through this kind of thing. Like a serious Christian would not view this as a war on Christianity. Like, the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church is a guy named Kirill, who was a KGB agent, and he's kept his job and now heads the whole church. And his job was to spread propaganda and to spy. He doesn't believe in God. Like, he's a communist, but he's posing as a priest to control people, to control this country, and to, or otherwise maybe undermine other countries. But I mean, I think that if you lie to people like about God, it's like about the most evil thing you could do, because you're misleading them in a really malicious way. Like, when you don't even believe in this stuff, and I mean, it's called a false prophet. And in particular, these are false prophets employed by a state government in a war situation. And it isn't hard to figure out why you wouldn't want a country that is invading you to have this kind of like it's a FSB, really, the church. I mean, it's a state church that is run by like the Russian government, and is filled with the priests are like FSB, the Secret Service of Russia, like the successor to the KGB and the NKVD and so on and so forth is the FSB. And frankly, these kind of clergy have been used the same way for a long time, even before. In Russia, like, it was the Tsar before that. And that's why they killed a lot of these priests or so. Like, if you see the movie like Battleship Potemkin, where the Russian sailors, they kill the priests, they're like revolutionary revolt, and it's because the priest is tied to the state power, to the Tsar's secret services and his control, the state control. It's used to control people. And this is also the case with the Greek Orthodox Church as well, under the Ottoman Empire, because they're under they're under a Muslim caliphate, but the Orthodox priests would really serve them well for state control of the population. And in Russia, there is no religious liberty. You can't, there's no kinds of proselytizing or gospel preaching or soul winning or door-to-door stuff. They've passed laws ostensibly against Jehovah's Witnesses, but not really targeting their more particular antisocial aspects. These are laws that have a more broad effect. on, because they don't really want a multitude of religions. You're supposed to go to the Russian Orthodox Church, but of course nobody really does. As far as people thinking that there's some kind of religious revival in Russia, there have been people who were hyped up in the West that thought this kind of for a while, and it's based on propaganda. But I'd speak to people in like Russians who live in Moscow, and they say nobody goes to church at all, and no Russian takes the Russian Orthodox Church seriously, except for like decrepit old babushkas, and that's pretty much it. And pretty much, maybe Easter or something, but maybe not. And other than that, maybe if you're like a soldier, that you have to go to like the Orthodox, the huge like temple, the the Russian Orthodox like soldier temple that they, and things like that. They have like the chaplains, and so like you see the priest is always putting the holy water on the like the Kalashnikovs and the jets, and he's got to bless all the helicopters, and he has to bless the nuclear missiles with the whole, so it's really tied to the state. And some people might, kind of look at that and think it's like a cool thing, but you know the more the if you really think about it, it's not. So these people are being, like, these clergy, these exact it's like a hostile clergy. I mean, they're preaching like for the destruction of the country. And when you see like clips of these, like the babushkas who go to these churches in like Ukraine, I mean, they're just like it's like Putin is like a prophecy of kind of his bombs are guided by God and so forth. And you can kind of see why they're cracking down on stuff. And otherwise, a lot of the complaining I see will just start off like, you'll see Russian propaganda trying to get ahead of it by saying that the Ukrainians are framing these priests as like pedophiles with child pornography and so on and so forth. They put it on their computers and they frame so on and so forth priests, because there's plenty of these stories where they raid these churches and they find young boys in bed with the priest, and they find all kinds of other stuff. Like, I mean, but it's gonna be like the worst kind of person who is who's just willing to take as his job just lying to people day in and day out for the Secret Service or whatever. It's not. I don't see the real religious. I mean, frankly, and then when you see when the Russian army goes into where they go into, there is no religious liberty. They stamp out every other kind of church and religion and make everybody be Russian Orthodox. And there's plenty of. I mean, the first after they got rid of the old government in 2014, the first Ukrainian president was a Baptist, and there's a lot of Baptist evangelicals in Ukraine and who are under attack, and those churches are destroyed where they're taken over. And I've seen statistics that so far a lot of these churches are either closed down or destroyed or converted into Russian Orthodox, and a lot of times people are just killed or put in prison. And I mean, it's really the exact opposite. The religious persecution is more being done by the people who Tucker Carlson are claiming to be the victims, because this is not a church that really sees um, a lot of room to share with they don't have a view of religious liberty. Everyone should be just baptized as a baby into their church, and then that's it. and then you're just tied to the state and so on and so forth. It's in a very weird way now. I mean, because it's the Bolsheviks who took over Russia, and they just converted the whole priesthood. Eventually, after they destroyed so much of it, after they killed so many of these people and demolished however many churches, and a lot of this is just because they saw this as the old regime. But then they figured they could use it themselves, and especially in World War II, more and more Stalin figured that he'd ought to just use the church to run propaganda and so on and so forth, because it maybe appealed to a different set of people than the Marxist propaganda. So now, I mean, Putin is not a new Tsar, and Putin himself is a communist, and he was in the KGB, same as the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. And I don't see why people would shed a tear, especially Tucker Carlson, who would go on and on about madrasas and how we need to target radical madrasas and so forth, because you have Islamic terrorists who, so I mean, Russia is basically too orthodoxy what ISIS is to Islam. I think it's fair enough to say, because it's militarized and connected to all this uh, politics and so forth. It's not just a matter of your faith or something. It's not like Zelensky is just so, he hates Christians, and for whatever, like he's just, he's woke or something, and he's Jewish, and so it, it's nonsense. The, these people are being dealt with for good reason. I mean, they're connected to the Russian state. I mean, no country would really put up with it. I mean, I guess people do put up with it. I shouldn't say nobody would put up with it. Actually, I'd actually say that Zelensky should be commended for his fortitude in dealing with this, because it's probably pretty difficult, and it's going to look bad. And he was advised by his advisor Arestovich, or like to not move against these people, just let it go. But he made the good call to actually put his boot to these people's necks. This is not Christian persecution at all. This is actually dealing with Christian persecutors and people who would persecute just about anybody else for their own, like, ethno-religious imperial vision, whatever that really is. But Tucker Carlson's full of beans on this. There's no one ought to be shedding a tear for the Russian Orthodox Church. You deal with these people, and even there are these people in our country who are like converting to Russian Orthodoxy. And you're seeing this more and more, and I think you'd see a lot more of it if Russia's fortunes on the battlefield were better. If they could just take over, like if they just stun the world with how their army performed, people would be more curious about their religion and would be converting to it. But there's already plenty of people, especially kind of like a far right kind of person, who sees, like, they see like the the holy water on the AKs and so forth, and they're like, they're attracted to it. So I mean, and these people are not going to be very patriotic to our own country either. It's just not so much of a threat. to us at this point because America isn't in a direct conflict with Russia, but Ukraine is. So I think really anybody should be able to see where they're coming from with this. I don't really get the argument that people should just be allowed to, like state services should just be allowed to just spread all these lies under a guise of like a religious kind of thing, especially when, like I said, you see how they treat every other religion who they come across because Ukraine actually there is religious liberty. There's also like a Ukrainian Orthodox church and so on and so forth, which obviously I don't really know any like particulars of the any sectarian particulars of that. I'm not going to get into anything like that. But I mean, like, it's not like you can't be like an Orthodox person or something. It's just stamping out a particular church that is proven to be like connected to like the military that's invading them. It'd be like if if you just say that like Al Qaeda terrorists or like or just clerics and so on and so forth. Um, I don't know. Anybody who's like really worked up about this and calling it, say, Christian persecution, I I think you should be very suspicious, especially when they probably know a little bit better, and they've probably read a history book. They probably know a little bit about the Soviet Union and so on and so forth. These aren't like secret things. Everyone knows that this church is like connected to all this stuff. There's no getting away from it. If I don't see the why you just say that this is a big thing unless you're just relying on people to not dig into it and just to immediately get emotional on quick sound bites and so on and so forth. Anyhow, that's the Russian Orthodox Church.